marriage and responsibilities of marriage, husbands, wives, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to go back over, I think we got down, correct me if I'm wrong, oh yeah, how's Cadence? Oh, she good?
Yeah, she's sleeping.
She's okay,
She
yeah,
walked last
she's
night.
on that third deal. So, I was just, things, you know, they talk about women, and it's difficult having a baby. I mean, I've never had one. But, you know, it's a struggle for both parties. You know, you'll find that. But, keep Cadence in your prayers. I'm sure hopefully, when she notifies them that she's pregnant, the police force, they'll hopefully put her off on something like that. So just keep it involved. I'm going to read verses 1 and 2, and Paul says, now concerning the things of which you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman, nevertheless, because of fornication, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Now, there is in this passage, evidently Paul had wrote to them, or they had written to him, and he makes a statement here in the latter part of verse number 1. He says it is not good for a man to touch a woman, and the reverse is true as well. A woman not to touch a man. Why? Why? Well, no,
Because they're not married.
because they're not married, okay? And he's not talking about, oh, hey, you know, they're giving a woman a hug, you know, or something. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about fornication, all right? So that's the point. It's not good for a man to touch a woman in that sense. He says, nevertheless, and he's given options here. Now, this is what we're going to talk about. He says, nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let each man have his own wife, and each wife have her own husband. All right? So to avoid that, he says, you must marry. Now, Paul is simply saying here in verse number 2, he gives men and women an option. All right? It's not a command. If I'm a man, I don't have to get married. Right? Is that what Paul says? Yeah, that's what he said. I don't have to get married. And if a man, Paul, and we're going to find this out later on, Paul gives instructions, and this too is optional. It's not a command. He says it's better if you remain such as I, not married. All right? And he goes on and explains, I think it's in about verse 26, why it is better because of the current distress, the persecutions and the difficulties that are at this particular time. But the things that he also says, and if you know what he's saying in the future in this chapter, he says, for a man careth not. Why is it best for a man or a woman not to get married? Now, he's not forbidding it. He's just saying, why is it better that a man or a woman not get married? Why? If you know later on.
If you put my name
Okay. He says it's better to marry than to burn. That's not talking about burning yourself on the oven. That's not what he's talking about. What's he talking about? Burn.
Talking about, is it maybe devoting, concentrating more on the Lord's work?
Yeah, that's one reason it's better to not be married, because your mind is not so focused as a man on your wife or as a wife on your husband. Your full attention can be given to the Lord. That's why it's better in that sense. Well, what does it mean it's better to marry than to burn?
Because it's better to marry and not have the desire and commit fortification. That you be married and twain together as one flesh to have those desires.
sexual desires that men and women have. Now, let me ask you a question. The majority of the people, and this is just an opinion, the majority of the people in the world, men and women, cannot say that, okay? Because the majority, and that's my opinion, the majority of the people have to have those desires fulfilled in marriage, all right? Now, many in the world today do that otherwise, outside of marriage, which Paul condemns, okay? But he makes the statement here, nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let each man have his own wife and each wife have her own husband. Now, here's a question. And this kind of goes with marriage, because I think this happens today, and that's my opinion, but is that the only reason a man and a woman should get married? To fulfill those desires? Is that the only reason?
For companionship, in other words.
Well, hold on a minute, hold on, just, no, you're right, but let's finish that, then we're gonna get into something else. That goes with that. So should that be the only reason why? Or there are other reasons why? Okay, folks, wake up, it's 15 to 10. What do you think? All right, let me ask you. All right, let me ask you. Some of you folks in here that's married, not these three or not the kids or whoever it might be, you can answer because you might know too. What are some reasons men and women get married? Why? Did why'd you get? Well, I'm not trying to.
To have a family.
Okay, to have family, have children. All right. Owen, can I ask you, why'd you get married?
So it's the same thing, family,
Okay, then you got one.
companionship.
Companionship.
I mean, it's, your wife or, your woman, your husband, that's your helper,
Yeah.
help each other.
Pam, Eddie, Eddie Boyd, ready. He got it.
Number one,
What's
you
that?
have to really love her first.
Okay. Now I want to
Without
ask.
love, it don't matter how many times you've been married, And maybe.
Well, it does matter how many times you've been married, but yeah. Let me ask a question going with what Eddie said. Because you really, really, really love her or him. Do you, and some of you that's been married a long time, let me ask you a question. Do you, and I'm going to say this about 15 times, do you, when you first get married, do you really, 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 really 15 more times love your wife or husband? All right, Dee Dee, we're going to have Peggy too, because they've been married a long time. Well,
It's a different kind of love that grows.
okay.
You think you can conquer the world when you first get married.
Then you find out you can't.
Then
Okay.
problems come.
Do what?
Then problems can come.
Good. Do you have fantasies about the reality of marriage when you first get married? Do you? You think, oh man, this is gonna be cake and ice cream all the time. I mean, it's gonna be beautiful, and it's gonna be what? And it's gonna be wonderful. And then, how long? Let me ask you a question. Those of you who've been married or are married, how long does it take for the honeymoon to get over?
Year to 2 years.
Next morning.
Jason said, let's back there. Jason Brenda's not here, so you can be feel free to talk.
Year, 2 years.
About a year, I'd give it shorter than that.
Usually when the first thing goes wrong.
Yeah, I think Dee Dee's right. I think the honeymoon's over when you think, man, he's got a little smart mouth. And I never realized that, Because I'm telling you something, you let stuff go when you're dating, because you don't live
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And you see signs of people when you're not living together that you think, wow, is this the same person I've been dating and took home at night? But let me tell you something else. People will say, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to live together before we get married. That way we'll really know what it's like. Does that work? No. Professional people who deal with that have shown that living together before marriage does not make it what it used to be. Is living together the same, but not only is it not right scripturally, but according to God, living together without marriage. But what is missing when two people live together in a fornication-filled relationship? What is missing in that relationship compared to someone who is married? What's missing?
The commitment to God,
Well, not just the commitment to God,
each other.
the commitment to each other. Because if I got no commitment, it's like a job. If I'm committed to a job, I have in the back of my mind, if they mess me up and they do me wrong in some way, what's going to happen? I'm gone. Bye. See you. When you're married, you can't do that. You can't do that. You are committed by God, maybe not by the rules of society, but by God, you are committed to one another till death do us part, unless they die or fornication. Okay? So, anybody got a thought? Anybody got some other reasons why people get married, y'all? I mentioned, I wrote down because they love, they have children, want to have children, companionship, caring because you care for someone. As you get older, all these things matter. But as you get older, what do you think is one of the most important reasons people get married? You see people, they like the old Tim Conway, how he walks like this, he bend over. Why do old people get married that can scripturally? Why older people? Why?
Companionship.
Exactly. That's why.
Someone there to help.
Nobody wants to be by themselves, okay? Well, a lot of people do. They're thinking, man, I'm glad I ain't married. I'm glad I don't have nobody because I can kind of do what I want to do. Freedom, whatever. Everybody's different, all right? So, those are some reasons. Anybody else got any other reasons? All right, verse 3.
Well,
James.
like God said, he said, not good for man to be alone, mankind, and made a helper. So you can help each other. So it don't seem like everything's so complicated.
Yeah. Well, he made the woman as a companion for man because she fits him, and he fits her, okay? So, that's true, Genesis chapter 2. All right, anybody else? Somebody read verse 3.
Let the husband render unto the wife due to
Affection.
and likewise also the wife unto the husband.
Just read verse 3 and 4, they kind of go together.
The wife ought not power of his own body, but the husband. And otherwise, likewise also the husband ought not power his own body, but the wife.
Okay, so he says, let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence. I think that's what the King James says. Is that what it says?
King James says benevolence.
Benevolence, okay. And likewise the husband. There's a responsibility, and that's why people get married. One reason why people get married is they are to render and fulfill the desires that the husband has, the wife to the husband and the husband to the wife, okay? And he says something here, and I want to go off of this just a little bit. He says, let the husband render to the wife her due benevolence or due affection. Then he says in verse 4, the wife, and I'm just paraphrasing, the wife doesn't own her body, but the husband, and the husband don't own his body, but the wife, okay? So when people get married, my body is my wife's, and my body is hers, hers is mine. That's just the way it is. All right? That's what God said, Paul says, through inspiration. And we all, you know, we understand what he's talking about. All right? But I got a question for those who aren't married. What about before marriage? Whose body is yours?
Lord,
The Christian.
Lord,
The Lord's. You belong to Him. You belong to Him anyway. But your body as a person who's not married is God's. Now how do I know that? Look back in chapter 6. Okay? Look at verse 19 and 20. Alright? Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit which is in you, which you have from God? And you are not your own. Your body as a single individual, man or woman, it does not belong to you. Alright? Get verse 20. For you are bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are whose? God. Your body, and married too, I mean, understand what, but keeping it in context, my body, if I'm a Christian, married or unmarried, my body belongs to God. It's His, okay? Why? Because Paul says, my body was bought with a price. What was that price?
Death on the cross.
Christ's death. He bought me. I am His. All right? I am His. I belong to Him if I'm a Christian. Now, when it comes to marriage, in the marriage relationship, if I'm not married, my body, understand that those of you who are not married, young people, whatever it might be, my body does not belong to my girlfriend or my boyfriend. Your body, as an unmarried person, belongs to God, but who else does it belong to? Huh? You. It's your body. And nobody has the right, and this is a good lesson for kids, teenagers, people who aren't married. Your body is yours, and it doesn't belong to anybody but you and God. That's it. Okay? Now, I know the way I was young. I was 19, right, Jim? I was, oh, by the way, Dave's birthday. 15. At 15 years old, and I'm not being prejudiced at all, but the guys will push their girlfriend or boyfriend to the point to, and I know that's, not exact, but I'm just using this because I was 15 one time, I think. The boys will push the girl, we know one another, and blah, 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 and will push the girl to the point to where he thinks he owns her body. No, sir. I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you're 30 years old or 40 years old and never been married. Your body belongs to you. It's not your boyfriend's or your girlfriend's. And let me tell you something, and I tell my grandkids this all the time. If some guy, and you're a girl, which should, if you're a guy or a girl and they push you to the point to where they want you to do something that you're not supposed to do, you get rid of them people. That's what you do. You get rid of them. Because they don't care about you, they care about the physical things that you possess. Get rid of them. You don't need them. Because your body belongs to you and to God. Okay? That needs to be taught. If that was taught today in the society in which we live in America, what would if every young man and every young woman had the mentality to say, my body, and I know you've heard this, but it's the wrong way. My body, that's garbage. Garbage. Your body, your choice. No, it's not your choice. Now, you can do it. You do whatever you want to, but there's ramifications and consequences for what I do. All right? So the point is that it belongs to God and it belongs to you, and nobody owns it until you get married. That's what Paul's saying here. Okay? That's what Paul's saying. All right, anybody got a thought? Question, comment, whatever. All right, afterwards, after you get married, it belongs to God and to your husband or to your wife. All right, somebody read verse 5.
Do not deprive one another, except with consent for a time, that ye may give yourselves to fasting and prayer and come together again, so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control.
What does he mean by that? What does he mean by that? Do not deprive one another, except it be with consent, that you may give yourself to prayer and supplication and so on, and that you come, but not only for a season. He didn't give us a specific time, but he says just for a season that you may come back together, that Satan tempt you not for your inconsistency. What's he mean? And in other words, there are desires that the husband has and the wife has, and if you decide you're going to stop and give yourself to prayer and supplication and so on and so forth, that's fine, if you agree on it. All right? If you agree to that, both of you agree to that, that's what Paul says, but you come back together lest you be tempted to do things that you ought not to do. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and this is true. A husband or a wife who uses their physical body as a tool to get back at a husband or a wife, what about that? Jason, you shaking your head. What about that?
That puts a couple in a bad position.
Yes. Is that not what Paul said? A woman or a man who uses that as a tool to say, you done made me mad, and there ain't no way. No, you can't do that.
And that can
According-
go just by ignoring him.
Yeah.
Just not talking to him.
Yeah. Or that's what he's not talking about, not talking here,
Yeah.
but he's talking about, we know what it means, but you can't, you do that, that's a violation of God's law. We cannot do that, married people, okay? So, anyway, let's get into, anybody got a thought before we go? We're going to read verses 6 through verse 9. Anybody got a thought on what we've talked about so far? All right, look at verse 6 through verse 9. And do me a favor, somebody remind me to stop at about 10 after. I got a mouse and we're going late. So, somebody read verse 6 through verse 9.
But I say this as a concession, not as a commandment. For I wish that all men were even as myself, but each one has his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that. But I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with matches.
All right, and we kind of already talked about this. So Paul, I just want to notice really verse 6. He said, I say this by concession, all right? Anybody else got another translation by what that word concession means? Permission, okay? He says, I say this by permission and not by command, okay? During the current distress, it's better to marry than to burn. Paul says this, but he's not saying that he is prohibiting marriage, okay? It's a choice. We can do it. I don't have to marry anybody. You don't have to marry anybody if you're not already married. That's our choice, okay? We can make that choice. But there are circumstances whereby an individual needs to marry or doesn't need to marry. That's our decision, okay? God doesn't command marriage or prohibit people from not being married, okay? But he does demand, God does demand what? What does he demand? Obedience to what did he? His word. And that obedience to his word demands, if I'm not married and I'm not going to get married, he demands purity. Purity in a marriage. Okay? Well, not purity is what he does, but he also demands purity before we get married. Okay? Alright. Alright, we're going to get into something else in verse number 10. Anybody got a thought on verses 1 through verse 9? Anybody? Y'all might have quiet this morning. He changes subject, and if we look at verses 1 through verse 16, there's controversy, mostly in the religious world, not so much, well there is, but there's also controversy in the Lord's church. And I think it's important, we're going to talk about this as we get into the scripture. Somebody read, because we're going to stay on chapter 7, verse 10, maybe for the rest of the class. Somebody read verse 10.
Now to the married I command, yet not I but the Lord, a wife is not to depart from her husband.
Okay, is the reverse true?
Agree.
Well, I know. But is the reverse true? A wife is not to depart from her husband. Would that go with the man departing from the wife?
Yes.
The Lord's not prejudiced. Okay? He's not a respecter of persons. He says it's good for the wife, but not good for the husband. It's very clear. Read the first verse 10. What are the first 4 words that Paul mentions?
Now to the married.
Now to the married. Now let me ask you a question. Is that a generic statement or is that a specific statement to a specific group of people?
Specific.
Specific. To the married. Now here's a question that we have problems in the religious world today. We have problems with this in the church. Okay? Some people will make a distinction between people who marry a Christian, 2 Christians get married, or a Christian marries a non-Christian. They make a distinction. Before we get on down into this chapter, we need to understand Paul in this chapter is not making a distinction in verse number 10 between a Christian marrying a Christian or a Christian marrying a non-Christian. He's making a blanket statement. It don't matter if you're a Christian marrying a Christian or you're a Christian marrying a non-Christian. This fits everybody. Understand what he's saying? It fits everybody. How do I know that? Who else made that statement? Who else made the statement that Paul made? Oh, come on, y'all.
The Lord.
Who?
The Lord.
Okay, the Lord made it. What did the Lord say in Matthew? Turn to Matthew 19, verse 9. Matthew 19, verse 9. What did the Lord say? Now this is the Lord, Matthew 28, 19 through 20, who has all what? Authority. All right? Now, the civil government has authority as long as it doesn't what?
Interfere with God's law.
Doesn't violate God's law. Listen and tell me if you don't agree that what Jesus says and what Paul says agree. Because if many people, some people today try to put the Lord and Paul at odds with one another. Well, the Lord said this, but Paul says something else as we get on into it later. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Would Paul say something that contradicts what the Lord said? Would he do that? Well, certainly not. Okay? Read verse verse 9 in chapter 19.
And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality, and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery.
Okay. That word sexual immorality, I don't like that myself. I don't think that's a fornication. The King James says, New King James says that. If you're looking for this that we've already looked at, what Paul says, now to the married, what word does Jesus use that clarifies that? What word? Whosoever. Huh? Okay. Well, we got one minute. Thank you, Jack. Whosoever, who does whosoever include? Does that mean married, unmarried, married, unmarried? Does that include everybody? Does that include Christians, non-Christians, married a non-Christian? Does that include them too? It doesn't matter. That word whosoever is inclusive. Whether you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, God says whoever. That's universal. And that's a problem today in the religious world, and it's a problem today. It doesn't matter who you are. If you are legally, scripturally eligible to marry, then God says, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and marries another, commits adultery. There is one exception that I can divorce and put my wife away and marry somebody else. What is that? Fornication. That's it. Now the world says, well, she burned the biscuits, or, I don't like him, blah, 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 so I can just get a divorce. If you do that by the government, the government lets you get a divorce anyway. God says, and this is going to cost a lot of people their soul in the day of judgment, because they have the mentality, God wants me to be happy. That's not what Jesus said. The only two reasons, death and fornication. That is it. Okay? And he uses the word, wherefore what God has joined together. That word joined, if you look up the Greek in that word, that means when two people get married, Sister Lizzie, okay? When two people get married, that word, not literally, but means that God glues them together. You're glued together. And what's the only thing that's going to break that glue? Fornication. Now, does that mean you've got to get a divorce? No, you don't have to. But God gives you that option. Okay? Anybody got a thought? We're going to get more into this next week. And we're going to delve into it more Thursday.
Yeah, some people might say in that situation, well, it was before before I became a Christian, or she became a Christian, but marriage was instituted before the Lord's church, way before.
Yes. Well, that goes all the way back, Jace, to Genesis 2. Therefore shall a man leave father and mother and shall cleave to his wife. There were no Christians back then. That covenant that God established started when? Where did it start? Owen? Where did that covenant start?
Day one.
Day one. Well, Genesis 2. That is the oldest relationship that exists in this world.
That's why this stuff must be taught to younger people so they can understand what a strong bond it is.
Yeah. It's a gluing, to me, it's a gluing together. You can't become unglued except for one cause, or death.
If you want to
That's
go
it.
to heaven, that's the way it's gonna have to be.
Now, I may not like that. I may not like that. And I don't have to do that. I don't have to put away my wife or husband before. I don't have to do that. But if I want to go to heaven, God gives me the power of choice. I can do what I want. So, hold that minute, hold us there, we got a couple of minutes. What we're gonna do is, after we get through chapter 7, we're gonna